Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're wading into the truly tragic and complex case of Andrea Yates.
It's a tough one.
It really is. And it goes far beyond just the horrifying act itself, committed on June 20th, 2001.
Definitely. We're here to analyze the sources, look at exactly where things went wrong.
Right, where the medical system, the legal system, maybe even family oversight, where they failed a woman suffering from severe postpartum psychosis.
It's an essential mission, though, a difficult one. This deep dive is really about understanding why this specific event, the drowning of her 5 young children, why it became such a flashpoint.
Yeah, for discussing mental health and criminal accountability in the U.S.
Exactly. And at the heart of it, you have this conflict over the legal definition of insanity, specifically those Naughton rules. They were really put under the microscope here.
And before we even get into the legal side, let's remember who Andrea Yates was before all this. Andrea Pia Yates, born in Houston in 1964, by all accounts, really accomplished. High school valedictorian, swim team captain.
And a registered nurse, right, at MD Anderson Cancer Center
Again.
for almost a decade.
Exactly, a high-functioning individual, which makes her descent, even more shocking. It seems it was decades in the making in some ways.
That background is so critical because it really contextualizes the break from reality. This wasn't like a lifetime of obvious dysfunction.
No.
It was more like a slow erosion, kind of compounded by these huge biological stressors.
So let's look at that history. Our sources, they detail these early struggles. Bulimia, depression, going way back to her teens.
Yeah, and she apparently even talked about suicide when she was only 17. Those were, early flags.
Definitely. Absolutely. Then came her family life. She married Rusty Yates in '93. And central to their marriage, it seems, was this religious drive.
Right, this decision to, quote, seek to have as many babies as nature allowed.
And that combination, the rapid pregnancies and her underlying predisposition,
Right.
it just created this perfect storm, didn't it?
It really did. The crisis, according to the sources, it properly kicked off after the birth of her 4th child, Luke.
Right. By June 1999, she was in a visibly terrible state. Her husband found her shaking, chewing her fingers.
Which is deeply disturbing. And shortly after that, she attempted suicide and overdose.
And that led to her first hospitalization and the diagnosis,
Yes.
severe postpartum psychosis.
But that wasn't even the end of the immediate danger. She was hospitalized again very soon after that first discharge.
Because she held a knife to her neck, begging to die, just desperation.
Horrifying. But it was after this second incident that doctors finally seemed to stabilize her.
Yeah, they used the antipsychotic drug Haldol, and the sources are really clear on this. Her condition improved dramatically once she was on that medication.
It worked. And that stability, that improvement, it leads us straight to the most critical sort of hinge point in the whole tragedy. The explicit medical warning, a warning that was then almost immediately ignored.
Ah, right. Yates' first psychiatrist, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, she testified she gave a crystal clear warning to both Andrea and Rusty.
Unequivocal. She urged them not to have any more children.
And she was specific about the danger, wasn't she? She put it in the medical record. Having another child would, quote, surely guarantee future psychotic depression.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a clearer, more devastating warning.
And yet, you look at the timeline, Yates conceived her 5th child, Mary, only about 7 weeks after she was discharged from Dr. Starbranch's care. 7 weeks.
It's staggering.
And what's fascinating, or maybe terrifying, is how quickly that successful treatment was undone. She stopped taking Haldol, the effective antipsychotic, in March 2000.
And 8 months later, Mary was born.
So the risk was known, the treatment that worked was identified, and yet somehow the system of support around her, it just failed to keep the medical advice or the medication going.
And that transition, right, from known risk back into this active psychotic state, that brings us to 2001, the critical year, when all those warnings just collapsed.
Her father died in March 2001, and that seems to have been the catalyst for the final, really rapid descent.
She completely deteriorated, stopped her medication again, started mutilating herself.
And the obsessive Bible reading, classic sign of severe religious delusion and psychosis.
Yeah, and she even stopped feeding baby Mary.
The sources show the medical staff, they did recognize the danger, at least for a bit. In early May 2001, she filled the bathtub.
Planning to drown the children then. But she stopped herself.
And she was immediately hospitalized after that.
Right. And this hospitalization, it produced one key instruction. One instruction that really defines the failure of supervision later on.
What was that?
Her psychiatrist at the time, Dr. Mohammed Saeed, he mandated that Yates needed to be supervised around the clock. 24/7, no exceptions.
Okay, so 247 supervision ordered, and this is where we hit that systemic breach.
Exactly. The morning of June 20, 2001. Rusty leaves for work. He leaves her alone, directly against Dr. Saeed's explicit instructions.
And his mother was supposed to arrive an hour later, right?
An hour later, that hour.
Yeah.
That was the window. That's when the murders occurred.
What really stands out reading through the sources are the conflicting stories around this lapse in supervision.
Oh, definitely.
Dr. Said later claimed he only found out she was unsupervised during a phone call after the killings, when Rusty called him.
Right. But Rusty's testimony, it paints a very different picture of Dr. Saeed's actions leading up to it.
How so?
Well, Rusty testified that he actually urged Dr. Saeed to keep her on the Haldol, the one that works so well.
But the doctor refused.
Refused, apparently due to concerns about side effects. So this creates a whole debate. Was the final breakdown because the Haldol was stopped? Or was it the lack of supervision? Or both?
And digging even deeper, there's this other potential system failure, often overlooked, the insurance constraints.
Ah, yes. Rusty suggested that when Yates was discharged back in May 2001, right after that bathtub incident, the hospital staff seemed ashamed, like they knew she was too sick to go home.
But they had to discharge her anyway.
Apparently, yes, because they had to comply with the insurance company's 10-day limit for psychiatric hospitalization.
Wow, if that's true, a 10-day limit driving the discharge of someone acutely psychotic and potentially dangerous.
That's the definition of a profound systemic barrier. It suggests financial constraints, not medical need, were dictating care at a critical moment.
And this feeds right into that whole intense debate about medication that came up in the trials. Rusty and his family, they claimed it was the new drugs Dr. Said prescribed, the antidepressants, specifically Effexor. He was giving her 450 milligrams, apparently twice the max recommended dose.
Right, they argued that cocktail caused the psychotic behavior.
And that claim got some traction later, didn't it? Because in 2005, the FDA made them add homicidal ideation to Effexor's warning label.
It did give it some weight, yes. But the defense had a strong counter-argument.
Okay, so how did the defense team, specifically Dr. Lucy Puryear, tackle that Effexor dosage issue?
Well, she testified that, yeah, the dose was high, but it wasn't actually unheard of in clinical practice. And she argued it was unlikely to be the primary driver of the psychosis.
So what was, according to her?
For Dr. Puryear, the real problem was stopping the Haldol earlier, the antipsychotic. She argued it takes days for Haldol to fully leave the system, and that's what allowed the underlying psychosis to just roar back unchecked.
So less about the Effexor causing it, more about the Haldol not being there to stop it.
Exactly. It's this tragic puzzle, isn't it? Failed medical judgment, maybe financial pressure, and then this critical lapse in family supervision, all colliding.
Which brings us to the day itself, the dreadful sequence of events, and then the legal process that followed.
Yes, the act itself. She carried it out with this horrific chilling method, drowning them one by one in the bathtub.
Paul, Luke, and John first, then Mary the baby she was explicitly warned not to have.
And then Noah, the oldest. He apparently ran, but she caught him, drowned him last.
And there were signs, weren't there, suggesting some level of planning, even within her delusion.
It seems so. She confessed later to her jail psychiatrist that she specifically waited for Rusty to leave because she knew he'd stop her.
And the family dog. It was found locked up, which was unusual, suggesting she consciously removed potential interference.
Small details, but potentially significant in a legal context.
Which brings us to the first trial in 2002, and it all hinged on that definition of legal insanity.
Entirely. The sources are clear. The defense experts, pretty much all of them, agreed she was profoundly psychotic, severely mentally ill.
But that's not enough in Texas, is it? They follow the Imniton standard.
Right, the very strict Imniton standard. Okay, so let's unpack that clearly because it's absolutely central.
What did the defense actually have to prove under Imniton?
They had to prove that at the very moment she committed the act, because of a disease of the mind, she either didn't know the nature and quality of what she was doing.
Meaning she didn't understand she was drowning her children.
Or, if she did understand the physical act, she didn't know it was legally wrong. That second part is crucial.
And the first jury.
They concluded she did know it was wrong. Legally wrong. Despite acknowledging the psychosis.
So the outcome was devastating. Convicted of capital murder, sentenced to life in prison. The jury did refuse the death penalty, though.
Yes, but still. The legal system found her culpable. essentially setting aside the overwhelming medical consensus on her mental state at the time.
And that conviction stood for 3 years
Well,
until one of the most bizarre twists in modern legal history came out.
oh, yeah. The verdict was overturned in 2005. Why? Because of materially false testimony from a key prosecution expert witness.
Psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz. I remember reading about this. It was astonishing.
It was. Dietz is the prosecution's big expert, he testified, claimed on the stand that an episode of the TV show Law and Order had aired shortly before the murders.
And this supposed episode featured a woman who drowned her kids and got acquitted by reason of insanity.
Exactly. The clear implication being that Yates saw this, got the idea, and was basically faking her symptoms to beat the rap using an insanity defense modeled on a TV show. Hugely damaging to her credibility. Except, as reporters covering the trial quickly discovered, no such episode of Law and Order existed, ever.
He just made it up on the stand as an expert witness.
Apparently so. It was entirely fabricated testimony presented as professional psychiatric insight.
Unbelievable.
And because this false claim was seen as potentially so influential, swaying the jury to think Yates was faking it, the appellate court unanimously reversed the conviction.
It just shows how fragile the whole process can be when it relies on expert testimony like that.
Absolutely. So the stage was reset, a new trial in 2006.
And the outcome this time, fundamentally different.
Completely. This time, after I think 3 days of deliberation, the second jury found her not guilty by reason of insanity, NGRI, as defined by Texas law.
So the legal outcome finally aligned with the medical consensus years later.
Years later, yes. She was committed to the North Texas State Hospital and eventually moved to the lower security Kerrville State Hospital, where she remains.
Okay, finally, let's look beyond the courtroom verdict. Let's examine the complex, often contradictory motivations she herself expressed and the layers of accountability around the family.
Right, because why she did it, according to her own delusional state, is just chilling.
What did she tell her jail psychiatrist?
She told the psychiatrist her reasoning was pure, devastating delusion. She believed her children were doomed to perish in the fires of hell.
Why?
Because she was evil.
Yeah.
Inherently evil, she thought. And because of her evilness, the children were not righteous. They had stumbled.
So in her mind,
And her delusional mind, killing them was the only way to save their souls from eternal damnation. She actually called the act the seventh deadly sin, which is just incomprehensible outside of psychosis.
and that terrifying internal logic is just worlds away from what the prosecution initially hinted at, right? This idea of spousal revenge.
Oh, completely. Defense experts totally rejected that motive. It didn't fit the profile or the evidence at all.
So the focus eventually circled back, didn't it? To the controversy around Rusty Yates, her husband, and what he knew or should have known.
Yes, he consistently maintained, publicly at least, that he never understood she was truly psychotic or capable of harming the children.
But our sources show a key contradiction, something Yates herself revealed later to her prison psychiatrist.
They do. Yates apparently told her psychiatrist that she did tell Rusty about Dr. Starbranch's warning, the warning against having more children because it would guarantee future psychosis.
And what was his reaction, according to her?
She claimed he persuaded her to ignore the medical advice based on their shared religious beliefs about procreation.
If that's true, that really shifts the narrative around family accountability, doesn't it?
Dramatically. It suggests a conscious decision to override a stark medical warning.
So this isn't just about one person's breakdown. It really feels like a systemic failure on multiple levels.
Absolutely. You have experts agreeing she was severely mentally ill. But the legal system struggled profoundly to define culpability under its rigid rules.
Then you have questions about the doctor stopping the effective medication, the hospital potentially constrained by insurance policies.
And the family members, particularly the one who arguably dismissed that primary medical warning. It's layers of failure.
The fallout was immense and lasting, too. Rusty filed for divorce in 2004, finalized in 2005.
Right. And while he remarried, had another child. That marriage also ended in divorce of about a decade later. The shadow of this tragedy is incredibly long.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listener? The Yates case, it's almost like the textbook example, isn't it, of that huge, potentially deadly gap between a medical diagnosis
A postpartum psychosis.
and the legal definition of insanity, especially under those old Maton rules.
Yeah, we saw total medical consensus on her mental defect. But it took years and 2 trials just to determine if her extreme delusion met the legal test for knowing right from wrong.
And that tension between individual responsibility or agency and these systemic failures, it's still right there.
Absolutely, especially around medical supervision, those insurance limitations.
Right.
And just recognizing the sheer danger inherent in severe postpartum psychosis, even when professionals have sounded the alarm.
When a patient tries to drown their kids, gets hospitalized, but is sent home, possibly due to a 10-day insurance cap, that's where the accountability discussion really has to start, doesn't it?
It really does. And maybe that leaves us with a final provocative question for you, the listener, to think about.
Go on.
Yates was ultimately found NGRI, committed to a mental health facility. Society is protected. She receives care. But what ongoing debate does her case fuel about the responsibility of others, caregivers, family members, especially those explicitly told to provide 204/7 supervision? How do we balance their responsibility against the patient's own agency when they're operating under such intense, maybe even violent, delusions?
It really forces us to confront the limits of care and maybe the limits of responsibility within what can sometimes be a broken system.
Precisely.
A deeply challenging case, but a really necessary deep dive. Thank you for joining us today.